Okay. It's Thursday, March 3rd, 2016 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is a special feature of Admissions Live. I'm your host, Erin Sapinka. On today's broadcast, we're talking about how social media is used during the college search. There are all kinds of reports out there that talk about how teens are using social media, but there's a big difference between how teens communicate and use communication technology in general, and how teens use these technologies specifically for the college search. I'm thrilled to be speaking with Gil Rogers today. Gil is Director of Enrollment Marketing at Chegg Enrollment Services and longtime friend of our network. Admissions Live is part of the Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live broadcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. Today's live viewing experience is powered by Maestro, the premier marketing tech platform for broadcasters. All episodes of Admissions Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Today's episode is made possible by Chegg Enrollment Services. Chegg Enrollment Services exists to help support better outcomes from the moment a student starts their college journey to when they are applying for their first job. Through a variety of digital and mobile solutions, Chegg helps make the process of finding, engaging, and converting prospects to enrolled students more personal and more efficient. This week, we're talking with Chegg about how students use digital, social, and mobile tools to find their best fit school and navigate the college search process. We'll be posting a link to Twitter to sign up for their webinar next week, or visit edu.chegg.com/events to sign up. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Do you agree that market research is one of the most important components of a brand strategy project? Without a solid understanding of how your audience currently perceives your brand, it's difficult to strike the right balance of reality and aspiration in evolving your brand's positioning. M. Stoner's free webinar on March 22nd will outline strategies and methods for conducting brand research at education institutions. They'll focus on research techniques that help you gain a real understanding of people's perceptions, beliefs, and behaviors. We're tweeting out a link now where you can learn more and sign up. And so now I'm extremely excited to welcome Gil Rogers to the show. This is one of my favorite shows to watch and be a part of every single time on Higher Ed Live. So Gil, welcome to the show.
Thank you. All that in 2 minutes or less. Great work.
So just a little bit on Gil is he's Director of Enrollment Marketing for Chegg's Enrollment Services team, leading students first focused research to aid college and university admissions professionals in saving time, saving money, and recruiting smarter. Gil publishes and presents on numerous research studies throughout the year focused on students' uses of digital, social, and mobile technology throughout their college search. Prior to Chegg, Gil was the Associate Director of Admissions at the University of New Haven, where he led a resurgence in prospect outreach and inquiry communication planning that led to a record-breaking enrollments for 4 years. So he knows his stuff. Before we hop into questioning, I just want to ask anyone who's watching along, please don't hesitate to ask questions using the hashtag HigherEdLive. I'll do my best to ask the questions as they're rolling in. So before we jump right into talking about the report, can you tell me what is the social admissions report for first-time viewers?
Absolutely. And we were talking before the show started today. If you really want to have some fun, go back into the archives and go to last year's show and the year before and see the shenanigans that is me. So social admissions report started about 4 years ago as a collaboration between Chegg and what now is TargetX. Or part of TargetX, where we were talking about how there's just so much concern and so much stress in the recruitment process of, getting in the next new thing, being a part of being the early adopter, but also not wanting to hop onto new things until they're proven, right? And every year you read articles in the New York Times, Huffington Post about Facebook is dead for teens, and Twitter is dead, email is dead. Well, if everything's dead, what are we doing? So we decided to focus a research study on really 3 main themes. How do students use digital media and digital sources, things like college search sites, college websites, throughout their college search process, and what influences their decision. Then we decide, and in addition to that, it was, how does social media impact their college search? And not just do students use Facebook, but do students use Facebook for their college search? Do they use Twitter? Do they use Instagram? And then every year, obviously, there's a new shiny toy. There's the Snapchats. There's the LinkedIn college pages. There's all these different things that come up. So, keeping up with those things. And then finally, and I think, the focus of this year's study really is on the impact of mobile technology and how students access college information via mobile, what they're looking for, what are pain points for them, what is that experience like, what do they want to do, what can they do. So that's really what a lot of this is expanded into this year, is still doing updates on the data with respect to the use of social media, the use of digital sources, but also really taking a closer look at the mobile aspect and messaging apps and submitting applications, those sorts of activities.
And when did this report first start? When was the first time you rolled this report out, and how has it changed since really that first report?
Yeah, so we started in 2012, and I think in 2012 it was more focused on the digital and social components. And I think over time, we've adapted the focus of the study to be about, to adhere to, I guess, what is important in the market, right? I think social media used to be a super hot button thing. If you submitted a proposal at a conference with social media in the title, you basically had a guaranteed slot, right? But over time, there's a little bit more understanding. Obviously, there's always more work that we can do, and it's more so that component of the study is more meant to be, a finger on the pulse of where you need to be today. But what I guess the newer hot button topic of the day is responsive design, mobile access, mobile technology, location-based marketing, things like that. So expanding the study to incorporate those types of things is really what we've done over time. And I think a lot of that, and obviously we're not unique in a sense that we do an annual study every year. Ruffalo Noel Lovitz does a great job with their e-expectations report. But I would say that, the focus of e-expectations is a more broader process. There's a social media component, but there's also the overall use of technology, and they focus on parents from time to time and other things. Whereas this study is kind of tailored, focused on, students first and what their resources that they're using are, so we can communicate that to the college audience.
I know I've been reading the Chegg report probably since you started putting it out, and that was when I was a student. And so it was kind of fun to watch as this entire thing was morphing. As a student who worked in admissions and was a student who used social media to help promote the admissions message, how this report really did reflect what I was seeing personally in my own searches for college, as well as my siblings and my friends who were younger than me, and how it accurately depicted their methods and how we cared about learning or being reached by the university. So this report hasn't been released yet. So what can you share with us about the preliminary findings?
Hashtag spoiler alert. Can't do too much. No, I'm just kidding. Before we hop into data points, it's interesting you share that about looking at how things change from you and your peers and students researching schools now versus 4 years ago. With respect to the data, it's always interesting to look at the trends, right, and see what was popular 4 years ago is not necessarily popular today, and that's not unique to social media, right? I think that's style, that's just people's favor and people's perspectives. Brands go in and out of style. TV shows go in and out of style. So platforms that students use are going to go in and out of style as well. So and it's just important to keep a pulse on what is important, and really, and again, specifically for the college search. So and I mentioned this a lot, and I've already mentioned it once, but when the Huffington Post publishes an article saying Facebook is dead to teens, it's not necessarily accurate for the college search process. One data point, I guess, that I can throw out, and I'll make sure I throw out the right data number, otherwise the research team will kill me, is Facebook's use of Facebook has declined overall year over year. There's no arguing that. But use of Facebook overall for college information has actually increased over time from 2012 through 2015. In 2012, about 60%, 58% or so of students used Facebook for college information and college research. That number is close to 70% now. So that's, and now with that said, there are more networks and platforms that students are using now too. YouTube has about 70%. Instagram has about 70%. Twitter is about where Facebook was in 2012. So it's important to kind of keep a finger on that pulse of, where students are and where they're interacting with schools. With Facebook specifically, what's interesting is they were passed this year by Instagram for college research information. So students using social media for college research. But Erin, who owns Instagram?
Yep.
Facebook, right? So, in a sense, any students leaving Facebook to go to Instagram are leaving Facebook to go to Facebook. So it's important to, keep those types of things in mind. There's just, and you're not going to be everywhere, but, half of students use 5 or more platforms when researching schools. So there's no silver bullet. There's no, try to be on every single platform, but there's also, you can't ignore them either. So there's that balance with the data, just understanding where the students are and where they're researching schools. And then again, from the data points, I think there's also that difference of, engaging with a school brand versus engaging with a student at the school. And there's always going to be that certain element of, skepticism in the marketing. Students are marketed to every single day, and so much of the marketing that they get is not meaningful. It's not impactful. It's not something that, really benefits their life. So, it's about adding value to that conversation. I think the best schools on social media are the ones that encourage collaboration, encourage connection between students, and then participate in the conversation. Don't try to drive it.
Yeah, I remember that Huffington Post article, and I remember the amount of emails that I got asking to explain what does this mean? How do we stop it? And my favorite go-to example every single time for anytime someone asks if students are still using Facebook is the success level of our accepted student Facebook groups, the successes of a Facebook chat that we have with the dean of admissions or another administrator. And then the other one I like to show is whenever we put up a photo album, including shots of students all around campus, how quickly those students are tagged in it by their friends or they're liked it by themselves. And so, I mean, we've just posted an album yesterday from an event and students were tagged in them within a matter of minutes. And so it might be dying I always tell people the way people are using Facebook is definitely changing and the numbers are different, but they're still there. And if you're, like you said, providing value, it really does. They're still there and they're still looking for information from you, even if it's just passively.
And I love the irony of the pendulum swing that you just talked about. 6-7 years ago, it was, which makes me feel old to say 6-7 years. 6-7 years ago, it was, oh my God, students are going onto Facebook. We need to manage this. We need to take control of this conversation. How do we stop kids from going onto Facebook to complain about the dining hall, to complain about the bookstore or whatever? Now it's, oh my God, students are leaving Facebook. How are we going to recruit them? How are we going to communicate? And it's just an interesting way that the pendulum swings. And I think a lot of that's the culture of higher education, right? It takes so long. We have a lethargic pace, a glacial pace of things that change. And then you get something like Facebook that comes in, takes over, and then becomes a part of a broader component. And then it's not, but then we have this fear of losing that communication channel. And it's interesting that, that's the way that the pendulum is swung, because, you will have all the data that shows here's our engagement, here's the impact on enrollment, here's the web traffic driven, whatever it is. But then the gut reaction of the administration is, oh, but, I read this article, the kids aren't using it, or, I don't feel like kids aren't using it. And then it's, you're back into the weeds of these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how that always comes up about things dying and what's going to be the next big thing. And the next big thing that I've noticed is the private communications. And so the biggest issue we just came across right now, not biggest, is seeing students who are moving into a GroupMe once they get connected in a Facebook group, and then kind of having a private space for them to have conversations with themselves without admissions people being in the Facebook group, or for whatever reason moving to this more one-to-one or peer-to-peer communication platform. What in the report have you seen that's been kind of the really new emerging thing? You mentioned that Instagram surpassed Facebook, but really it's Facebook.
Yeah.
What are some other big
Instagram's
findings?
been around. Yeah, I mean, Instagram has been around for a little while now, so it's not new. It's just grown over time. But again, everything has grown over time. So it's interesting to think about those components. I think that, with respect to mobile, yeah, I mean, private messaging apps are kind of all the rage. And, Snapchat is one of those ones that you could put in the private messaging app bucket.
Mm-hmm.
You can also put in the social media bucket. There is definitely a distinction. I think that's part of why, Facebook created Messenger, is to have a messaging app. And then in addition to WeChat, in addition to GroupMe, in addition to, Yik Yak and Kik and all the other, messaging apps that are out there. And I think I just threw out a bunch of terms that any administrative people in a college might be like, what the heck is all these things? Which, I mean, I don't even, half of them are sometimes too. But I think messaging apps are definitely growing with respect to use, but then that's again where you have to draw that distinction between use for the college search and use in general. Half of students, based on our research, would download a private messaging app specific for a school. If you think about a messaging community where, you can communicate with other admitted students or admissions officers or current students at the school. You can do that in a public forum like a Facebook or a Twitter or an Instagram, and they're going to, but it's another channel to, enable communication with students and be able to, facilitate a community like we did with, private Facebook groups 2-3 years ago. Those things, there's ebbs and flows of all those types of things. So thinking about how do we, encourage collaboration, encourage communication. And I think private messaging apps are one, but, students use different messaging apps for different things. You might communicate with your family on Facebook Messenger. You might communicate with your friends on GroupMe, right? So there's just a different, we have to respect those boundaries and focus on developing a community, not trying to creep on their Facebook or try to creep on their Messenger or try to creep on their GroupMe. And that's the kind of stuff that really turns students off.
Mm-hmm. I feel like a bobblehead. I'm just nodding my head like, yes, this all makes so much sense. So in the beginning, you touched a little bit on just mobile apps and mobile browsers. And I'm looking at the infographic that you guys have out.
Pretty, isn't it?
Yeah, I like it. It's teasing some of the information you've found. And can you talk a little bit about this growth in native apps and mobile browsing? I'm reading here over 1/3 use mobile as primary device to research colleges. What other information like that did you find that we should really be paying attention to? Because we've been saying for a while, mobile friendly, but now it's mobile or die, essentially.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, that's a new acronym of the day, right? MOD, mobile or die. I mean, I think the college search is a microcosm of consumer behavior in a sense that you should hashtag tweet that, whatever. That's a cool statement. Much like, and this is going to broaden the scope, I think, of the conversation a little bit, but much like when we think about how students go about their college search on the web, right? Many students find the .edu experience to be important and helpful, influential, and that makes complete sense because the .edu is the place where they learn about application deadlines, they can read up on the major, they can learn about the campus community, take a virtual tour, whatever it is. But the schools.edu is a lot like the menu for the restaurant published on the website of the restaurant you're looking at and going to on Saturday. What do you do when you look at the menu? You go to Yelp and you see, does this restaurant suck, right? They might have a great website, the menu might look good, but the quality of the food might be terrible, the service might be terrible. So I go onto Yelp to be able to decide, is that a good experience, or is this going to be a good place to go with my friends? Or when you're looking at houses, you might drive through a neighborhood, see a house is for sale. You go onto Zillow, you look at the mortgage rates, you look at the school system, you look at those types of things. So as grown-ups, quote unquote, these are things that we do all the time. So students go about their college search in the same way. They go on to Niche, which is the Yelp of the college search. They go on to University TV. They go on to Chegg Admissions or whatever, right? and they start researching schools, and they start comparing and shopping and looking at them side by side, because they can't go on to Dartmouth.edu and newhaven.edu and every other school that's on their list and compare you side by side. They just don't do that. From a competitive perspective, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for you to be able to do that kind of stuff, unless you're better than every other school. Then of course you could do that. But so the college search via college search sites and digital sources is a microcosm of consumer behavior, and I think that accessing content via mobile is the same thing. If we think about 93%, and this is stuff that's not our research, this is ZDNet, it's Consumer Reports, it's other things. 93% of people have their smartphone within arm's reach 24 hours a day. When you go to visit a campus, when you go to visit high schools and go to college fairs, where is your phone? It's on you all the time, right? So you're using it to do everything from keep up with your social networks, to research stuff that you're working on, to play Angry Birds or whatever the cool new game is these days. And students are living in that same environment. The average millennial accesses their phone, I think it's over 150 times a day, right? So Gen Z, which is this group coming in, that's closer to 3,000 times a day, or 300 times a day, probably 3,000 times a day actually, but 300 times a day. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to think about how are we communicating and having a conversation with students in this environment, and is it via social? Is it sponsored posts? Is it mobile advertising into mobile apps? Is it, there's all these different things that we can do to communicate and build a relationship with students, and, being a part of that environment, being, on the platforms that they are in. We have a lot of schools, and this is a little bit independent of the study, but we have a lot of schools that are talking about location-based mobile advertising. So how do we reach students on their mobile phones at things like NACAC college fairs, students on community college campuses for transfer recruitment, these types of things for, there's technology that is available to be able to do those types of things, and leverage the fact that we know that over a third of students are using their mobile phone as their primary source for researching colleges, and take advantage of that. I think there's a lot of opportunity to, really, be thoughtful about how we communicate via mobile devices, if that makes sense. And I know that's my super high level tangent for 5 minutes, but I hope that answers your question.
No, it definitely does. These numbers that come out about mobile friendly and just the amount that we live on our phones, and even I'll just look at my own usage and the usage of my boyfriend or my mom or anyone that's just using these devices, and generally you see just how reliant we are. And it's what they do on a bus. It's what we do when we're walking somewhere and don't need to be paying attention to what's in front of us, or we immediately go down and we're reading. And why not utilize this time in these spaces more accurately, and making sure that when we're putting new content together or planning a new campaign, first, how will it look when they're looking down at their little iPhone 6 or Samsung, whatever, and just thinking that always is the first step, because the chances are they're going to be looking at it at least one way on that device. And so mobile is just this growing good monster, I think, because it just makes our information so much more accessible. It's helpful for students that don't have a consistent connection to internet. Maybe they only have data on their phone, or maybe it's only when they're at their high schools. They have ability to check stuff that maybe they don't have access to at home. And I think it just makes all this information accessible, and really seeing these numbers prove that students are there living in this mobile space, I think will only continue to grow higher ed's focus on making sure our information is mobile friendly and accessible via these devices.
Yeah. Just to add to that, I think that, another preview of the data, but, over half of students visit a college website on a mobile device once a week or more. And, by and large, what they're telling us with our research is that that experience is, not great. It's either challenging or, simply okay. Only about 16% of students tell us that the mobile browsing experience is excellent on the college search sites that they browse to research college information, and that shows a huge opportunity, I think, for increasing support and making things more accessible. I think, you talk about the next big thing or the new emerging thing. I think mobile web, mobile browsing is the next big miss for many college admissions offices and many marketing departments. To not have a site that is at least mobile friendly, if not responsive, right? It's a very difficult obviously thing to address within your community because you have so many different heads that you're trying to report to with your .edu. But your .edu is a marketing channel. Majority of students again favor a .edu website over social media, over college search websites, over whatever as official resources of information. But if that information is hard to find and hard to get to, specifically on a mobile device, you're gonna lose students. So I think that 5-6 years ago, social media was the big miss. How are schools engaging? How are schools communicating the process? And I think for the most part, many institutions have fixed that. That's why students still turn to Facebook pretty regularly for college info, because every college has the Facebook icon on the corner of their website, and every college has the Facebook icon on their brochures. So students know that they can go there. But the mobile experience, I think, is the current area for biggest improvement with respect to marketing and serving students through the admissions process. In addition to obviously the other things that we talked about with direct mail and spamming students and all these other things, but with respect to the things where students go to gather information, mobile optimized sites is the current big miss for many institutions. Not all. There's obviously many schools that do a great job, but I think it was, again, Ruffalo and Levitz's data they published last year, over half of college websites are not set up to be mobile friendly. And that to me is a big miss.
That's a scary fact, because I think even just how often I access my college's information on my mobile device, and if it wasn't mobile friendly, I can just imagine how personally frustrated I would be, and I'm on campus already and I work here, versus a student who's I go here.
Choice to go to the website. Prospective students have plenty of choices.
Yep. And that it seems so clear that, okay, well, if they can't access our site, they're just going to go on to somewhere else.
Yeah.
And
especially, and you hit the nail on the head too with if you have a strategic priority or a mission to increase diversity or support underrepresented first-gen students, to support students from lower income areas, many times, and I don't have any data to pull on this right now, but it's all available and it's common knowledge, I think, many times, as you said, that data plan is oftentimes the primary access to the internet for students that have that already tougher road through the process. So if you're trying to attract and support and engage with those students, and your website is not mobile friendly, that's a big miss for you. And that's not even a marketing blow your enrollment goal doors off priority. That's a serving students that need that support priority. And that is the way we should always be looking at this type of stuff. Obviously, there's always that lens of there's institutions trying to generate more applications or whatever it is, but if you're trying to increase access and support better student outcomes, which is something that we're passionate about, it's you need to invest in that type of effort, whether it's you work with a company like mStoner or you do it in-house or whatever it is. You should focus on building out your mobile site over a mobile app. I think a lot of times schools think, especially because 80% of what people do on mobile devices is using mobile apps, but specifically for research in colleges, I think that's when they click on Safari, that's when they click on Chrome to go to the college's website directly, or go to Niche or US News or whatever it is. You're not downloading the US News app. I don't even know if they have one. Sorry, US News, if I your app, but I don't think there's a lot of downloading apps for college search. I think it's the mobile site, and then downloading apps for communicating and engaging with the community. That's different than browsing and learning about the school, if that makes sense.
Oh, it definitely does. I just am thinking about the apps that I download to like order food or something, and how I almost always delete them right after I use them for their purpose. And I'm like, all right, I don't need that on my phone right now. I'll just download it the next time. So I like the mobile web experience first, and then following it with a mobile app. So before we jump into a couple of other questions, I just want to remind our audience, if you have any questions, please feel free to tweet them at us using Higher Ed Live, and I'll make sure to ask them during the show. So what are some other key findings that you think higher ed pros are going to be excited to hear, or just new facts, I guess?
The entire study. No, I
all
think
of it.
all of it. The entire thing. It's funny because I was, thinking about that before we had this conversation, and there's a certain element of the more things change, the more they stay the same. So it's not like we're going to tell you to go on like the brand new shiny toy social media service that is hot and out there right now. So, but there's always this level of, you need to have a balance between strategic thinking and being an early adopter, right? And you don't want to ignore everything. It doesn't kill you to squat a domain name, right, to make sure that you're owning your school's brand. I think that's a sound, prudent strategy when something comes out, but you don't want to dump a ton of resources and effort into something that isn't proven, even if it is free, right? If the social network is free. Facebook was free for a while. It still is free, but if you want to get attention on it now, you have to invest in sponsored posts. You have to, sponsor content, et cetera, for the most part. So it still is free, but not so much free. So I think that there's that element to it, and then there are some things of really rapid change. I think that for the past couple of years we've said that visual content is obviously is rising in importance, and is going to rise in importance because people are visual creatures, right? And I think that's why, while Twitter has popularity, it hasn't grown at the same pace as the other platforms, even ones that have come after it. Snapchat has grown pretty quickly and rapidly, but I would say that there's still a certain semblance of what is your Snapchat strategy. Again, just because students use Snapchat doesn't mean you should be on Snapchat. The brands, the school brands that are successful on Snapchat are the ones that have super strong brands anyway, right? If you're not a Dartmouth, you're a small regional private school that doesn't have a huge social media following, huge brand, you're going to invest a lot of time and effort cross promoting your Snapchat on your Facebook, on your Twitter, on your Instagram. And then you get to the point where, how much do you want to be promoting your brand versus Snapchat's brand, right? So, it's thinking strategically about those types of things that we'll talk about in the study when it comes out is, best practices for those sorts of things. Because yes, frequency of Snapchat use has definitely grown over time, while frequency of use of Facebook has declined. But again, specifically for college information, and as specifically as a effective vehicle for reaching students. And that's not to say that you can't have a great Snapchat strategy and you can be really engaging, but I feel like there's a predisposition for good brands have a good following on Snapchat. If you can't get if you can't get Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube down, don't start with Instagram until you've got that taken care of. Because if you can't be awesome everywhere, focus on being awesome in key places where they're most important.
I love that. That's the number one piece of advice I give to people who are looking to start a social presence, whether it's a department, a student group, a personal account. It's always, what can you do really, really well? Because not having an account is not as bad as having an account that's quality just is not there. If you're not actively producing, if you're not producing content that's engaging and very visual, it's more hurtful than just not being present in a space, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that there's something to that, and there's also something to clearly establishing what your goals are, right? Goals before tools. We say that a lot on this network. Not sure why. You know, if your goal is to generate more inquiries and more applicants, social alone is not necessarily going to be the sound strategy for you. Social is a decision engine, not a exploration engine in many respects. Students don't go on to Facebook to find colleges. They go on to Facebook to find the colleges that they're considering and learn more about their community. Same with Instagram, same with YouTube. You're not going to go on and just do general college search information. You're going to go and you're going to look for specific information about Dartmouth, about New Haven, about Hartford, whatever it is, right? So it's understanding where in the funnel social has the highest impact. And, there's ways to use social to support yield or to support conversion from, your search names and that sort of stuff to get conversion at the inquiry to applicant level. But that involves, one-to-one marketing. It involves, first party data advertising. It involves a sound strategy with that as the key component to it. If you're just putting out content on Facebook to try to get and linking to your information request form or linking to your open house invites, that's not going to get you the same return as investing in social in a different way.
I love these shows because I just sit here and nod my head yes and say, please just keep talking, because it's so great to hear stuff that either I've been seeing or trying to figure out and understand better, and see it supported or cleared up with numbers is just wonderful.
Yeah. So, I know there's millions of viewers out there live right now, but this is really a conversation you and me. So, are you familiar with, I guess, first party data, one-to-one marketing, ways of using, your data sources to expand to social networks? Or would it be helpful, I guess, for the audience to go more in depth on that process specifically? Because it is a newer way of using social.
Being really selfish, I say absolutely yes, because
it's just us here, so that's fine. So I think, when we think about one-to-one marketing via social, we have all, and it's great because I'm in our offices in Santa Clara, California, so I'm surrounded by all the innovation and the culture and all the cool people building fun things around here. If you think about traditional recruitment, right? So this goes out of the mobile, out of social for a minute. What do? We buy names from data sources. We get names from inquiry generators like Chegg or like CapEx or like Hobsons or whatever, right? We have all these lists and we send them mailers, we send them view books, we send them emails. We do our best to, convert them to inquiries. We call them, all those sorts of stuff. What if there were a way to take those lists and bump those databases up against Facebook, up against Instagram, up against Twitter, up against mobile web, mobile app browsing, and be able to serve content across those channels specifically to those lists? I think a lot of schools, when they do Facebook advertising, they just use, a targeted DMA. They look at what I want to advertise to people who are friends of people who like my page, and people who like my page, and that sort of stuff. And that's fine, but what if you could take those ad impressions, those sponsored updates, and only display them to the students who you're actively trying to reach? Now, if you work with a Noel Levitt, or you work with a Royal, you're getting a bunch of names, right? And you've already done your predictive modeling, you've done all your analytics of these are where we should be buying them. So I think that's going to be the next thing with respect to reaching students on social and mobile, is really targeted media with high impact, focused calls to action, because you have the data to be able to know, is this student an inquiry versus is this student an applicant versus is this student an admitted student who has not yet deposited. You can serve different creative across all those platforms, focused on where that student is in the funnel. And I think that is the most exciting thing for me, is thinking about how to leverage that type of technology and that type of outreach to get in front of students when we know that 70% of students are on Facebook for college information. We know that over half of students are on Twitter for college information. So you're not going to find everybody on any one single platform because they use 5 or more platforms. But if you can build out a marketing strategy to do those types of things, I think that's the type of stuff that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about how do we expand our reach with social media. And does that cost money? Yeah, it costs money, but if you're paying for sponsored updates and posts and you're paying for names from different sources, why not combine those strategies together and actually save money because you're focusing on the students that you're actively trying to recruit and not just this broad, market segment that Facebook filters into. So I think that to me is one of the more exciting down the road things that schools should be thinking about.
That again, just a bobblehead here saying yes. That sounds great. So I love the direction of the conversation, but I do want to give people, when is the report coming out? How do they get it? And where's more information that they can learn? Because I want to make sure that we definitely give you enough time to talk about where people who I know want to download this report now can get it when it's available.
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways. So we are hosting a webinar 1 week from today, 2 o'clock Eastern time. If you go to edu.chegg.com/events, it's on the calendar. You can click to register. And then obviously we'll send you the login credentials and all that kind of fun stuff. Attendees of the webinar will be the first people to receive the full report when it's released. We do that just as a benefit that's a benefit and a perk of listening to me for another hour, I guess. You can also go to our blog, which is edu.chegg.com/insights, and there is a request the report. So if you can't join the webinar but you want to be one of the first people to get the report, you can fill out the form there, and we'll send you the report as soon as it's available. The timing is, we're going to host the webinar next week, and then we have superstar, rock star graphic designers that do really cool things to make things pretty. So it will be out likely the last week of March, or at the latest the first week of June. So we just want to make sure, obviously, we have all the data ducks in a row and make sure everything is clear and clean. And I feel like the difference, internally we call white papers at Chegg orange notes, partially because of the orange color. And I feel like the main distinction between an orange note and a white paper is a white paper oftentimes is very data heavy, lots of charts, lots of graphs, lots of copy. Orange notes are a little bit more in actionable insights. So we'll have the data charts, we'll have the copy, but we'll have recommendations for addressing those types of things, like the one-to-one marketing, or which social network should you be looking at? When should you be driving students to go to Facebook to learn more about you? Those sorts of things. So being a little bit more prescriptive from a strategy perspective. So that'll be out the last week of March, first week of April. So we're able to get that all together. We also do have what we call a tip sheet, which is a quick one-pager, easy to print off, pass around the office, run off copies, that has 4 or 5 just super high-impact data points that that we've identified that then you can use for downloading, or that you can use to look like a rock star to your boss and say, hey, look, I have some insights on this research that hasn't even come out yet. So that's available off of our download section of our website, so edu.chegg.com/downloads. So those are the 3 places to go. Sign up for the blog at /events. Sign up to get the white paper, orange notes, whatever you want to call them, at what did I say? /insights. There we go. And then hit the tip sheet, go to /downloads, and that's available now. And so those are the three ways to engage with the content and have it available. Obviously, you mentioned the infographic. That's up on the blog, so check that out. That gives you some good insights as well.
Oh, yeah. It gives you the numbers right away about the 70% on YouTube, 70% on Instagram, 68% on Facebook. And I know that if I would bring those numbers back to my office, just that little infographic, people's impressions would be completely changed of how students are interacting. The infographic alone is really useful. And I, just as a total plus, yes, everything you said, I keep the last year's report on my desktop because I use it so frequently to reference just the more, like you said, the strategy side of it. So I get all these numbers when we download the Pew Research, or we download whatever the latest white paper is, including a bunch of data. All the data is great, but the Chegg report really does lay it out, one, in a really visual, clean, beautiful way, so that if you share it with someone, they're not overwhelmed with the jargon, with numbers that they might not need to know. And it just provides more action items than just 70% of students use Facebook to search their colleges, and leaving it at that. It really does provide a ton of direction. So I suggest signing up for it so that you can get it delivered to your inbox as soon as it's live, because I know until this one's delivered, I will share the 2015 one with all of my colleagues as we're looking at admissions information for yield and stuff like that.
Great.
Yeah. Any more pieces that you can give us, little teasers, stuff that really kind of is going to be new and just completely different or emerging on the report?
Yeah, I mean, hashtag spoiler alert again. I think that, we've covered a lot of the newer stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What I think is most interesting is the trends, right? I think that when we look at the trending data and seeing the increase in specific platforms, in 2012, I believe I mentioned this specific data point earlier, but it's worth really looking at. In 2012, about 28% of students used Instagram specifically as one of the platforms to research colleges, and that number went up to 48% in 2013, and then in 2013 it was 28%. In 2014 it jumped to 48%, and this past year it jumped again to 70%. So those are the things to look at when you're thinking about how important, how impactful things are. I feel like things like Pinterest, people were all over Pinterest when this is going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. It's like, what is your Pinterest strategy? And yes, there's analytics and there's Pinterest for advertisers, all those other things, but less than a quarter of students use Pinterest for college research. And I would say that 21% of students that use Pinterest are the power users that are also on other platforms. So again, if you can't be awesome on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, I would say things like Snapchat, things like Pinterest, and I don't mean to put Pinterest and Snapchat on the same plane because Snapchat's way higher with respect to use, but things like those platforms are ancillary and shouldn't necessarily be a time suck for you. You only have so many hours in a day. You only have so much resources, especially if you are doing sponsored posts and sponsored content. You only have so much budget, right? So you got to make sure you're using that budget wisely. And I feel like, again, the first party data component, the one-to-one marketing, is a better fit than trying to promote your Snapchat presence, trying to build out a Pinterest board. And I think the best Pinterest board I would build would be like, a picture of a diploma from Dartmouth, and then my diploma from University of Hartford, and say nailed it, right? I think that would be the best way to just use it in a funny way. But I think that nothing against the University of Hartford, just taking a friendly jab at my alma mater, but it's look what it produces. I think that's a distraction. I think that Pinterest is a distraction, and Snapchat in a lot of ways, while used a lot by students for college research, is more in that private messaging bucket where students don't necessarily want to follow your story every day on Snapchat. I mean, they might, and if you do a great job with it and you're doing a great job with everything else, then cool. I'm not going to tell you not to. I think 2 years ago I was in the, and you could probably pull up the recording, 2 years ago I was in the Snapchat's a waste of time bucket, and it was 2 years ago, but things change over time, and it's about adapting to that change.
One thing, I am so glad that you use Pinterest, because I have been an adamant anti-Pinterest for my university since I can remember. I love it personally. The value and the effort that goes into it just never matched up.
Yeah.
How long it took to put together and the return on investment never lined up. And that's so good to hear that that's something that still holds true. And Snapchat, holy crap about the rebranding and repositioning they did, because I remember as a college student who used Snapchat all the time, I said, oh, I would not follow a brand on Snapchat. Like that's, no. And now I think it's a great tool and I love following brands on Snapchat. But I always like using them as a case study for repositioning and branding yourself despite a rough start for brands.
And that's important to think about too with brands on Snapchat too, though, is you're not Coca-Cola, you're not CNN, you're not, the New York Yankees, right? So those are brands that have a predisposition for people to potentially want to engage because you want to keep up with the news and you want to keep up with your sports scores, you want to keep up with what's going on. To build your presence as a college takes more effort. And again, if you're positioned to invest that effort, then great. But if you're not positioned to invest that effort because you're not doing the other things well, then you might consider reframing your strategy. And this, again, might be something that changes next year because we did see a pretty decent spike in Snapchat year over year. But a big part, I think, about the benefit of the social admissions report specifically is this is what you should be thinking about today type of study. The social media component specifically of the study is the one that's most prone to change. I think a lot of the higher ed studies out there, use of the importance of the view book, the importance of the mailers that you get from colleges. Those numbers stay pretty consistent, 1% up or down, 3% up or down year over year. Social and mobile are the ones that have the big peaks and valleys of use over time, and it's because it's newer, right? And it's just so fragmented. It's honestly like the college search website bucket. Their digital sources is so fragmented. Every year there's a new college search site that comes out that is going to be the next big thing. It's going to be the next way for schools to connect and engage. And there's a handful of kind of old guard ones that have been around for a while, and there's always a flash in the pan one, the one that they get the giant booth at NACAC for the year and then they go away after a year, that sort of stuff. So those things happen too. So it's keeping an eye on those sorts of things. So I think to go back to the top of the show to talk about what the benefit or the impact of this report. I think the best part about it is that it's a good year-to-year gut check on where should I be investing my time and effort. And 2 years ago, Snapchat would have been an awful place to be, not necessary to be there. This year, it's kind of a 50-50. If you got the time and effort and resources, it might be a good idea to give it a shot. But you're not going to be at a super competitive disadvantage by not having a strong Snapchat strategy. So it's about being awesome where you are, and if you're awesome on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and even Twitter, then you focus on a thing like a Snapchat. But Pinterest still way off in left field by itself on its lonesome. I mean, it's inevitable. Someone's going to tweet at me or email me, "We've got a great Pinterest strategy. Everybody loves it," and it's like you're the exception, not the rule.
Yes. Just again, yes. Let's just end it there. Yes. Everything yes you've said, and good night. So before we sign off, one more time, we've tweeted out the link a couple of times. I've retweeted the link. Where can we get this report?
edu.chegg.com/insights. It's going to be the best place to go.
Alrighty. And so you heard it from him. That's where you'll get it toward the end of this month, beginning of April. Look for it. Like I said, it's invaluable information. Thank you all for joining me today, and thank you, Gil, for stopping by and just sharing all of your knowledge, because like I said, I love it. I'm totally abusing this opportunity to pick your brain, but also sharing all this information with everyone out there.
There we go. Well, thanks for having me as always, and we love what you do here at Higher Ed Live, and we look forward to this study again next year.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.